Hi kids, it's Mrs. Fravel. How are you? Good, me too. I'm fine, thanks. Um, we're going to wrap up kelp forest this week. We've been talking about the kelp forest ecosystem in marine biology, and this is going to be our last unit for the semester in this time of COVID when they took away a bunch of classroom time. But I hope you've enjoyed what we've done so far. So we've been talking about the kelp forest. We talked about what is kelp. You had an assignment that went with that. Please make sure that you did the kelp reading and questions. And then we also talked about one of the most important keystone species in the kelp forest, the otter, a little ocean weasel that I adore. They're my favorite animal. I'm pretty sure I'm decided on that one. They are. So today we're going to talk about what else lives in the kelp, and then you guys are going to do an activity building the kelp forest food web. But let's just delve a little bit more into some of the other important animals we find in the kelp forest. Okay, so you should be taking notes so that you can pass the test. Throw the test. Urchins. What are urchins? We talked about them a little bit. We've talked about starfish a little bit. We talked about a lot of things. What is an urchin? So an urchin is an animal that belongs to the phylum Echinodermata, and other echinoderms include sea stars. So I have some samples I'm going to show you. So sea stars, which you might also call starfish. Okay, this is a chocolate chip starfish, which is technically a tropical species. This is a red starfish, okay, vulgaris. Is that right? Can't remember. Okay, so sea stars and also sand dollars. Okay, sand dollars. These were all once living animals. I just have their skeletons, which I'll talk about in just a sec. And then, of course, little urchin. Okay, so all of these animals belong to the same phylum. And the word urchin, just fun fact, the word urchin actually means hedgehog. So these guys used to be called the hedgehogs of the sea, and they are an integral part of the kelp forest ecosystem because they, as any animal in an ecosystem, they have their place and they do what they're supposed to do. They eat kelp. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. They are not a bad animal. The problem that we touched on a little bit already when we did the kelp reading, what is kelp, and then also we watched the movie Saving Otter 501, and they talked about urchin barrens and what happens when the urchin population on the west coast of the United States got out of control when otters were hunted to extirpation, which is local extinction, from most of the west coast of the US and Canada in the 1800s, early 1900s. There weren't enough predators keeping urchins under control. Otters eat constantly. They eat a lot of urchins, which sounds painful, but they do. And so they keep that balance in the ecosystem because urchins will eat kelp and they'll eat enough of it. And I'll show you their mouth in a minute, but they chomp through the holdfasts. Remember, kelp is it a plant? It is a plant. You're right. Is it a vascular plant like a tree? No, you're right. It is not. It is an algae. It is technically a macroalgae. So it doesn't have roots because it doesn't draw water and nutrients up through those roots. But it has these structures called holdfasts. There's one right there. And there's one back there with an urchin on it. And holdfasts are just how the kelp hangs on to the substrate, onto the rock. And then it has floats so that it grows up toward the surface of the water to get sunlight to do photosynthesis. And all of its structures that look like regular plant structures, like leaves and stems, they're not truly those things because they don't have veins and vessels in them. But they sure look like they could be. But they are a macroalgae, and the urchins munch on those holdfasts. The kelp float away and can't survive being tumbled around as they're floating on the surface. They get washed onto the shore and die. So we saw this phenomenon of the urchin barrens, and the kelp forests are still not completely, they're not recovered. Otters have returned, but not in big enough numbers. They're still considered endangered. They don't they don't reproduce quickly enough. So there's still a problem with urchin population explosion. Okay, what are these animals? So what's an echinoderm? Echinoderms all have this basic set of characteristics that make them an echinoderm. And then each group, sea stars, urchins, sand dollars, and then the weirdos that are sea cucumbers, they each just have specific variations on these basic characteristics. So all echinoderms have radial symmetry. That means they have a center point, and so they have a center point, and all of their body segments or sections radiate out from that center point. The center point is their mouth on the benthic side, and their anus is on the top. So these guys are all benthic. They all crawl around on the sea floor with their mouth on the bottom, anus on the top. And their body is covered with spines or bony plates. And they do have an internal skeleton, and that is what you are seeing here and here. Okay. These are the dried skeletons of echinoderms. We call their skeleton a test. It's not a shell because it's not on the outside, but it's a test. Okay. And you can see on the sand dollar, you can see that remnant of the starfish type body, that 5-part radial symmetry. And then in a sand dollar, the test, their skeleton filled in between the arms, and they became this flat disc over time. And the same with the urchin. You can see again, got that center, and then their body sections radiate out from that center point of their mouth. Okay? And they move via a really kind of ingeniously cool mechanism called tube feet. So they don't have blood. What they do is they draw water into their body through a structure called the madreporite or sieve cell, and they'll pull water into the internal part of their body. I think maybe, you can't see them on these guys. They'll pull water in, and that water inflates a series of tubes inside of their body, like your blood vessels, but not blood. They fill them with water. And they have these little canals, these tubes inside their body, and at the ends of them, in various places, they have little bulbs with suction cups on the other end. And they have muscles associated with them. And these are their tube feet, and they can extend them, and starfish, sea stars, they have these structures called an ambulacral groove there. Okay. And ambulacral groove is where their little tube feet come out of their body and then they can move. Usually if we were in class, I would have a starfish, a live one of these for you guys to play with. We'll see if we can do that. And again, on this guy, I think you can see the madreporite. Right. It's right there. That's where they draw the water into their body. Okay. With urchins, they're a little different. These guys, their ambulacral grooves and their tube feet on many species extend all the way around their body. So these guys, if you think about a starfish, they are a starfish that has been curled up into a ball. Okay. And then their innards go all the way through that ball. And these guys have tube feet all the way up their body. This particular video I'm showing right now. So this was one of my pet urchins. Her name was Fancy. She was a tuxedo collector urchin. That's what this was. And they have tube feet that go all the way up their body. And those tube feet not only help them move around, like they can crawl on their sides and upside down and all kinds of things, but they also hold things with those little suction cup feet. And collector urchins will pick up shells and seaweed and all kinds of things, and they use them as shade. It's adorable. There's a meme on the homepage of urchins in people's tanks. People have given them little hats to wear and they love it. And Fancy used to do that too. And you can see some little bits of shells and gravel on there. Let's just watch those little feet again. Okay, so you can see all of these little clear floaty bits. Those are her tube feet. She's got them extended. She was perched on the very pinnacle of a rock, and I think she was wondering, well, where do I go now? She kind of got herself stuck, but she was fine. Okay, so tube feet, radial symmetry, complete gut. They're really weird, but also really cool. No brain, no head. The mouth, though. Whew. This is the issue that kelp forests have when the urchin populations get out of control, is these 5 razor sharp teeth that surround their mouth and can chew up kelp like it's nothing. And kelp, if you've ever felt it, it's really rubbery. It's not like a leaf or a stem you might feel on a house plant or something. They're very rubbery, thick cells, and urchins can chew right through them, well, like nothing. In fact, there are some urchins that don't eat kelp, urchins that don't live in kelp forests. They'll eat other algae, and some of that algae is embedded on rocks and in corals, and they'll just chew right through the rocks, just chew right on down and get food that way. Okay, so these sharp teeth are on the tip of this structure called Aristotle's lantern that is inside of them. If any of your mothers or grandmothers have a little framed picture of a sand dollar with little doves, like a sand dollar split in half and little doves flying out of it, I don't know, that was a thing for a while to have that piece of art. That is the Aristotle's lantern in a sand dollar. And sometimes if you shake them, you can hear rattling around in there. It's Aristotle's lantern that was attached by muscles and tendons, but when the soft body dies, those tendons just rot away, and so they're loose and rattling around in there. But that's what that is, and that's how they eat. This picture that came with this diagram, this is of a slate pencil urchin. Their spines are really really big for protection. Okay? And internally, they've got everything they need. They have a complete digestive system. So they've got a mouth, they've got an intestine, they do digestion, and then they've got an anus. They don't have a heart, they don't have a brain. They just have that water vascular system. All of their gas exchange is done cell to cell through tissue diffusion, and then they have their gonads as well. And here's a fun fact: if you eat sushi, if you eat urchin sushi, you're eating their gonads. Go ahead. I'm out. Okay. Any questions about echinoderms? All right, let's move on to sea puppies. More sea puppies, you guys. The kelp forest is full of water dogs. This is order Pinnipedia. They are a mammal, vertebrate mammal. They are carnivorous. There's a disagreement sometimes in biology how to categorize them. They're either their own thing or they're just part of carnivora. But either way, they are carnivores that feed as predators on anything that they can catch. They'll eat fish, squid, shellfish, mollusks, whatever their teeth can break into. These guys breed on land and give birth on land, and then the pups are raised on land, so on a beach situation. The pups can't swim. They feed them, and they grow up fairly quickly. I want to say it's just a couple months, and then they're weaned. And so the mothers have to leave their pups on the beach to go out and feed. And it can be a pretty dicey time, but they do this in giant groups called rookeries. And it's a noisy, beautiful thing. They have physiologically, when we talked about otters have the densest fur of any marine mammal. Really thick fur, no blubber. These guys, thick blubber, lots of fat. And they all have fur. Some of it's thick, but not quite as thick as the otter. They are really well insulated just with fat for their cold water habitats. They're found everywhere in the world. And then they have all 4 limbs. They are a quadruped carnivore, so they have all 4 limbs, and those are adapted to swim, so they have flippers. And they have 35 different species of seals, sea lions, and walruses. And these are just some examples of the super cute puppies, but don't pet them because they're carnivores and wild animals. You should never touch wild animals, especially not carnivores, because they got bitey teeth. Okay, and never get near an elephant seal. All right, so what's the difference between a seal and a sea lion? How do you know when you're at the beach and you go, ooh, water dog, water puppy, what is it? Is it a seal or a sea lion? Here's how you tell. Just by looking at them, sea lions are a little larger and they look a little more comfortable when they're on land. So if you see them move, they are much more likely to raise their head up really high because they've got this nice long neck that they can turn. And they have an external ear flap, and that's the quickest, best way to tell. They've got this little external ear flap, where seals have this very short neck that they can't really look around, and you can't perceive an ear flap. Their ears are there, they're just flat against their head and covered with fur. These guys also have some limb differences. So sea lions have much more flexible and sturdy on-land limbs. So their front legs, their anterior flippers, when they come out of the water, it's like they use them like flippers in the water. When they come out of the water, they can stand up on their wrists, turn their flippers backwards, and they can walk on them. Their hind legs, they can, when they're in the water, their hind legs are extended mostly behind them, acting as a propeller. And then when they get on land, they can turn those frontwards and walk upright on them. So they kind of do this shuffling, do-do-do-do, four-legged walk. That's a sea lion. Seals, they're schlubs. They just, on land, they just go, oh, shung, 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 shung. That's how they move. They can't put weight. They can't support themselves on their flippers. Plus, most of them are so chunky, their little flippers don't even reach the ground when they're on land. There's a video right there. I will link it under this one. Make sure you know the difference between a seal and a sea lion. Okay. And in the kelp forest, these guys are really important predators. Again, they keep shellfish like mollusks, clams, and fish populations under control. They're a tertiary predator, so they are preyed upon by orca and by sharks. They are a bounteous meal of fat and muscle, and there are also indigenous human societies that subsist on pinnipeds as well, during the winter especially. Okay. So we have harbor seals in the kelp forest, we have sea lions in the kelp forest, and there are several species of fur seals. And fur seals are weird because they look like sea lions, but they are a seal. It's a genetic thing. Okay. Okay. Any questions? Okay. What about them fishies? Fishies. Of course there's fish in a kelp forest. There's fish everywhere, and they are, you know, the most important things in the ocean. So this is just a few of the more prominent or prevalent species of fish in a kelp forest. So this is a kelp rockfish. People fish for them a lot. The leopard shark, which are beautiful mid-sized sharks. They're kind of, there's another one called a pajama shark. They're beautiful and they're smart, but they are really voracious predators, really good at their job. Wolf eels, these are cool. Wolf eels are fish. And they are mighty hunters. They'll eat urchins, they'll eat fish, they'll eat anything. And these guys are really cool because they've been observed hunting cooperatively with octopus. Like a wolf eel and an octopus will hunt together and help each other flush out and catch prey. Because octopus can get into any space, so an octopus will stick its arms into little crevices in the rock and scare out any fish or any crabs that are in there. And then the wolf eel, with that big giant jaw and teeth, catches it. And then, you know, theoretically they share the kill. They work together. It's very cool. Garibaldi, this bright orange little guy, those guys eat kelp as well. This is the state fish of California. I just learned that. And the California sheephead, these guys, Semicocyphus pulcher. These guys also eat urchins. They're very large. These are really big fish, very pretty. They'll also eat urchins, but in no way in the same amount as an otter will. And then here are just some other beautiful inhabitants of the kelp forest. This ecosystem is so diverse and so important. A lot of fish species outside of these, there are a lot of pelagic fish species whose larvae grow up in a kelp forest because it's so protected and sheltered and shallow, and there's a lot of good food to eat. So a lot of fish grow up in the kelp forest and then take off and spend the rest of their adult life as a pelagic fish. So this is a crucial, important ecosystem, and a lot of humans don't really think about it because ew, kelp washed up on a beach, it smells bad, and it's like gross, rubbery, and why does it have little bubble things on it? It's gross. And the water's cold. We don't like to swim in cold water unless you're a surfer. But exploring these ecosystems is a truly beautiful experience. They are lovely. And if you want to see more beauty of them, there's a really good documentary on Netflix that I would show in class, but we're out of time, and also I don't have the rights to do that. But it's called My Octopus Teacher. And if you like octopus or don't know if you like octopus, you should go watch this movie. And it's set in a kelp forest, and it's lovely. It's amazing to watch watch what octopus can do and how they can think and feel. We ran out of time. I have a whole thing on octopus. Thank you, COVID. Okay. And let's not forget that kelp ecosystems are shallow water ecosystems, which means they are close to continental shelf. They are on a continental shelf. They are mostly in more active margins, so the water drops off a little faster, but they're in shallow water, and there's a lot of interaction between the kelp forest and the land that it grows adjacent to. So we have a lot of land animals that also exploit the kelp forest for food, including seabirds, shorebirds, and land birds. Carrion eaters will pick through washed up kelp at the rack line, eating crustaceans, amphipods, all kinds of things. Also, coyotes and other land predators can depend on animals from the kelp forest that might get washed up, or crabs that come up on shore. Again, just really important ecosystem. Sorry, I need a drink. Okay. Any questions about how awesome this ecosystem is? I know I'm in a mood. I love them all. Okay. All right. Your assignment for today. I'm sorry, there was something in my throat. Kelp Forest Food Web, that is on Canvas. The instructions are there. Read all of the things, and that is due Wednesday the 6th, unless you're not watching this in January 2021. Yes, made it through 2020. Kelp Forest Food Web is the assignment. Go find it on Canvas. It's next. Make sure you watch the other linked videos that's under this one. And have a great day. Be kind and be happy. And if you can't be happy, be good and be kind and be healthy. And bye.